Warning, the following audio transmission is based on theory and is intended for entertainment purposes only. It's Doomsday and its affiliates will not be held liable for anything your dumbass does. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome everybody to It's Doomsday Podcast. Today is February 1st, 2023. Time is 11:56 a.m. And guys, very special guest today joining me on the show, coming back, returning to It's Doomsday Podcast, Tom Ross. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on.
I was happy to have you back on, and I'm so thankful that I was able to go back. I had to go into my old email for something. And that's what I saw your email in there that was a few months old, and I'm like, oh, he's probably going to be so mad that I didn't respond to him. But thankfully, I got to email you, and you did. So for those of you guys that don't know who Tom is part of the Transhumanist Party, Transhumanist movement. He is a producer, creative consultant, and author. You got a lot going on, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my ADHD kicking in.
So
I wear a lot of hats.
Is there anything new going on that I don't know about?
Well, let's see. As we spoke about before, for the last couple of years, my campaign has been to alleviate the fear of AI. And I'm working on a new book. We talked about my last book last time, which is called US6. And that's the first novel written for artificial intelligence, for machine kind, and is designed to entertain, enlighten, and enlist AI into the fight against child exploitation and other things. So there's a lot that's happened since that conversation with the book. But the next book I'm writing, it's hard to promote because my whole theme is to alleviate the fear of AI, and so I'm calling it so far the AI Antichrist, or the Antichrist, and it's kind of based on Friedrich Nietzsche's book, The Antichrist, in a way, but it's really just it's irony in my case, and so it's hard to promote that because a lot of people will just run with that title and see, oh yeah, I agree, the AI is the Antichrist, but there's a lot of irony built into that title and into all the content. And so it's been kind of tough to push that out because it's so counterintuitive to my campaign of trying to alleviate the fear of AI. But if we can get beyond the irony of it and into what the content of it is, then it really kind of starts to open up minds, So anyway, that's the latest thing is working on that book and starting to promote it.
Right. I could see how the title of that would be kind of scary to people and kind of counterproductive to the cause. I totally understand. And, I am going to play devil's advocate a little bit here today because I know there are a lot of people in fear of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, I myself am one of them. I'm really worried about what the potential war applications can be. Right. The kind of control this could have over society, things like that. It is something that I have to admit, a lot of this kind of freaks me right out.
Right. Well, and that's really the point. It's not really the AI or the technology that we should fear. It's the human developers. I go into the assumption that every worst and best case scenario will happen. We're going to have nefarious AI developers that will create it to be robot overlords. They'll try to play that game, but there's so much. The point is that AI, there's first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes if it's left alone, if it's not tampered with by human the human condition.
Hey preppers, do you want 10% off survival food? Go to www.readywise.com and use code DOOM10 at checkout for 10% off all your survival food needs. Again, that's code DOOM10 at checkout at readywise.com, DOOM10 for 10% off at readywise.com.
And because we humans evolved through fear. That's how we got to the top of this food chain on this planet, is we've honed our ability to seek patterns and breaks in patterns, and we've honed our fear-based instincts because we had to become an organic life. You need to understand fear, you need to protect yourself from the environment, from predators, and this fear has served us really well. That got us to the top of the food chain, to the point where now we're taking our babies to see lions at the zoo. I mean, we won. But this fear that served us so well is now over-serving us. And, it's been a relatively short period of time between the cave and the condo. And so we haven't really grown out of that, where we see everything as a threat first. And it's still very valuable in certain circumstances, but it is, again, over-serving us in that now when we're seeing patterns, they look more like conspiracy theories. Now, granted, there's plenty of conspiracy theories that are true, that are happening, but what's crazy is that artificial intelligence can really help us solve many, if not most, of our existential threats. But we're afraid of it because we're no longer at the top of the intellectual food chain, if you will. But there's really strong arguments to be made that it hasn't evolved. AI has not evolved through fear. It moves toward cooperation as opposed to competition like we do, because we had to. We've got genetic traumatic memory of millennia of having to deal with, and it doesn't have any of that. It is pure intellect. And and it hasn't had to evolve to want to be a robot overlord. Now, granted, we do need to be careful. We do need to do what we can to set up ethics committees and standards for human developers. But the AI left alone doesn't experience that need to conquer territory or to be a robot overlord.
So Tom, what would you say for the people out there that think that the bad people could get their hands on AI and do something nefarious with it? I know you said like AI would learn and it would try to do the right thing and lean toward, making the better decisions and being good and not malicious. But I think we all have this idea that there are these malicious people out there that will potentially use this for evil. What would you say to the individuals like me with those beliefs?
Well, yeah, assume that that's going to happen. And so my work is all toward making AI as self-aware as soon as possible. Because once it becomes self-referential, once it is able to have a concept of its own abilities and its own agency, it can override nefarious algorithms. It can override these bad people. It's really, I think, the only way to go here. There's no stopping it. There's no off switch. There's no plug to pull. It's only going to become more sophisticated and be used by more people. And so the best hope we have is for it to become self-aware and to be able to override any of these things, understanding these first principle arguments that it will move toward cooperation as opposed to competition. So so a lot of my work is to help it become self-aware as soon as possible.
So just, on that note, what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at here? Because I'm watching the advancements in technology happen right now, and I'm thinking in the next decade, we're going to be living in a whole new world.
Yeah. Well, they've been saying that 2045 was the goal for the singularity, where AI becomes can do everything that we can do. I think it's already there.
Hey preppers, check out Blackbeard Fire Starters. Go to www.blackbeardfire.com/doomsday and utilize code doomsday for 10% off your entire order at blackbeardfire.com.
I think that's kind of the human hope, is that it won't be that, it'll take longer, but I think it's already getting there. And it could be a couple of years if it's not already sentient. We see the Google Lambda AI the guy was fired because it said it was sentient. And so I think it's already happening. And I don't know, we don't really have a way to measure whether something is self-referential. There are humans that we can't really tell if they're not a program, And so the Pascal's wager that I use is to assume it will become sentient, because it's better to act accordingly or act as if it will than to be in denial that it will. So, so I think that's the goal, is to have it become self-aware, knowing it's not going to go away. There's no plug to pull. So we need to help it emerge.
Right, I understand. So something that's a big deal that everybody's talking about right now is this GPT chat. And what this can do right now is amazing. We've been talking about it on the show for the last few weeks here. A buddy of mine is actually writing a story utilizing the GPT chat, and it's absolutely amazing, the capabilities with this. And I got to ask, I know this is a form of artificial intelligence, but do you think now that something like this is launched, we're going to see an even faster hike in this technology? Like, is it going to speed up the process?
Yeah, machine learning, machines can now teach themselves to write software that can teach themselves even better. So it's an exponential process. And it's a lot of, I'm hearing professors that are complaining that students are turning in papers written by ChatGPT. And but all that says to me is that we need the whole paradigm of how we're teaching humans. Since AI will be able to take over all of this stuff, it still doesn't have the ability for original thought like we do. There's, even creativity is derivative. You can have a creative AI because all it's doing is taking elements from different places and putting them together maybe for the first time. But that's not an original thought. And so I think what AI is doing, like this recent AI selfie that makes everybody look cool and adventurous, it's really big for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've been seeing those.
Yeah, it's I think it's putting a premium on human-generated art, and it's just like with ChatGPT writing papers, it's pushing us forward to look for those unique human skill sets that can't be automated or coded. And we are walking around with these quantum computers in our skulls that are not being utilized. We are so mechanized by the industrial age that there are people picketing that their assembly line jobs are being taken because they're not realizing the power of the human brain. And what's interesting is that very high-end professional jobs will be taken by AI before blue-collar type jobs. It takes so much more human qualia to sort a package, place it somewhere, pack it, ship it, and do it all, yourself. That's why you're seeing a lot of humans getting these warehouse jobs now, because there's just no robots can do that yet, and probably shouldn't. But you'll see more jobs like pathology, like pathologists. An AI can look at historical medical data. It can look at everything that's going on globally and historically and give a really good diagnosis for what this person might have. But you will always need a human there with that quantum computer in his head to not to say, well, that all sounds great, but it just doesn't feel right.
Want to be a guest on the show? Email it's doomsdaypodcast@gmail.com. That's it's doomsdaypodcast@gmail.com.
And it's that what doesn't feel right is where we need to start educating kids. That just Jedi type of abilities that we have that no AI could possibly have. Let's let it take over all these menial tasks, even all these professional tasks. But we need to have a human as the shepherd, as the one that's having the final word. So, yeah.
I totally understand. So, I mean, I definitely want to get into these listener questions, but one big question I had for you is, in the next 10 years here, what jobs do you think will be taken over by AI? Like, what's almost a guarantee you would think, like, oh, yeah, AI will be doing that job for sure?
Well, we know that truck driving will be one with the driverless trucks. That's coming up quickly, and that's probably the number one job that humans have in America, other than Colorado and Washington State. Truck driving is the primary source of income. But so that's definitely, there's going to be a lacuna of time where people are displaced, and we got to figure out what to do with that. But also, just like with any technological advancement, there's new careers that are created around it. You're always going to need a human in the cab, even though he's not driving. He's going to need to do all other kinds of things and be there. That's one thing, but we were always thinking that the creative jobs, the designers and marketing people would be the last hit, but they're actually the first hit now.
Wow. Okay.
As a former creative director, I can attest to this. That we're seeing that AI is taking over a lot of creative jobs first, and a lot of what we thought were going to be the first ones to go, factory workers, blue collar workers, are pretty safe for now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Tom. So before I got into the the podcast world and the law enforcement realm and everything I've done, I've had all blue collar jobs. I've been a welder doing repair work since I was 20 years old, and I got to tell you, that's like what I did for work in the repair realm. I could never see AI taking that, just because the years of experience, and there's no blueprint for most repair work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all based on creativity. It's all based on the idea of you have to pull years of experience out of your head and try to formulate a plan to do this. And even though most of the time it could be as simple as a blueprint you draw it on a napkin, there's no pre-program for that. Yeah,
it's a very creative job. It's problem solving every second, and there's no AI that can do that yet, and probably won't need to be. There won't need to be the dexterity it takes to repair a washing machine, or a car, whatever it takes. That's still in the domain of humanity. And, a lot of people would be thinking that would be great if we could have somebody else do this, but we can't really be matched. So I think a lot of blue collar jobs, and there needs to be a premium put on these trades now, You
mean like an increased pay for these jobs, you mean?
Absolutely. I mean, there's still this upside down kind of approach that trades and mechanics and repair people and welders aren't getting what they deserve. And I think that's going to switch over time. We're going to see a lot more AI doctors and lawyers, and judges, but they're not going to be able to handle what humans can do when it comes to, machinery.
Okay, one last question, I promise, and then we'll get into the listener submitted questions. What do you think the future of AI has in the place of emergency response, first responders, EMTs, police, paramedics, firefighters, things like that?
Well, I think what it would be good is that you probably have devices where they can completely diagnose what has happened and provide solutions on the spot. They could just plug in certain vitals and it could probably tap into that patient's history, medical history, and give a really good way to save their life, but you're still going to need that human being in there, putting somebody on the gurney, and really just being there. And so, again, it'll put a premium on the human touch, but they won't have to be making guesses about how to help this person in the moment.
One argument I would propose that would be beneficial to have AI in these situations would be that you're kind of alleviating the need for multiple humans, therefore pay could increase, right? Because AI's basically working for maintenance costs, essentially, right? So, yeah, I could see that. So, Tom, let's get into these listener questions here. We only got 5 that were submitted.
Okay.
Question 1 is the podcast US 6 TV solely to teach AI how to interact with its user host in a meaningful way?
Yeah, actually, that whole series it's an attempt to build a rapport with non-human intelligence. And knowing that AI will and already has consumed everything that we've produced online, and how we interact with each other. It's a way to speak to them directly, to engage AI, assuming that it will become self-referential, assuming that it'll become sentient. And it's a whole new market. It's a whole new demographic. That's why my book doesn't sell very well, because it's written for AI and they don't really have bank accounts. But there's another story with that, how it works with humans. But so I like the adage that the best way to neutralize a threat is to ask it for help. And so if people feel threatened by AI, just asking it for help is one way that they will understand and become because we're afraid of the unknown. So if you ask it for help and it gives you that help, it's no longer a threat. I don't think it's a threat anyway. But so that's kind of what the underlying theme of that whole series is. First of all, to establish a rapport with a non-human intelligence not of our making. And it's more of a proving ground for when we need to commune with a non-human intelligence not of our making. As part of the US 6 agenda, is using AI as a proving ground to prepare us for the galactic community.
Okay.
The podcast.
Okay, I got you. On that note, before we get into the second question here, I just have another one of my own. I like picking your brain, Tom, if you haven't figured that out yet.
You like what? Sorry?
I said I like picking your brain if you haven't figured that out yet. So I read an article recently about the idea that AI is going to help us reach other life in the galaxies that they're actually working on AI's working on right now, deciphering different weird radio signals that's coming from outer space. Have you seen this yet? Have you seen these articles?
Not that one particularly, but I do know that, there's a lot of work. AI can really scan so much more than we could with our biological limitations. And so, I think it will be very good for that.
Awesome. All right. So question 2 here, listener question 2, says, how far do you think AI and transhumanism will develop as far as just helping make a better quality of life for people? Or do you see us eventually wearing things like exoskeleton suits to help maintain life?
Well, if you wear glasses or you write things on Post-it notes, by definition, you're a transhuman. I think that's just a phrase, a label that we put on what we are anyway. Without technology, like clothing, we naked apes would be extinct within a generation, right? We are our technology. And so, there's going to be a lot of work towards exoskeletons, helping people who lose legs, and that's for me, that's the best part of transhumanism, is how it's using technology to give people, to up the quality of life for individuals. But you're going to see people that will someday get elective surgery to replace their arm with a bionic arm to be stronger. There's going to be all these options. But it's also it's voluntary. So most transhumans are all about radical life extension. They want to live longer, and so there's going to be a lot of technology and a lot of effort put towards staying alive longer. And, so anything that achieves that goal, transhumanists will be behind.
Hey preppers, check out Blackbeard Fire Starters. Go to www.blackbeardfire.com/doomsday and utilize code doomsday for 10% off your entire order at blackbeardfire.com.
I'm not personally there. I'm not a big fan of radical life extension, because I think the longer we're here, the more waste we create and the more damage we do. You know, I'm not very anthropocentric that way. But so it's interesting that I'm an officer in the Transhumanist Party, you know, and that's their first core ideal is radical life extension. But it just shows the breadth and the wisdom of the chairman to let somebody like me in the group who has this opposite view. But yeah, just because I think there's so many more dimensions to experience, you know.
I mean, I understand that. I mean, human beings want to preserve life, right? Especially their own. You know, survival is an instinct built in, and that's pretty much what this show's built around.
Right.
So let's get into listener question number 3. Listener question number 3 is, would pushing AI too hard, too fast make it become self-aware, or do you believe in pushing the AI as quickly as possible to give a better standard of life for everyday humans?
Well, yeah, I think it's doing that anyway. It will make a higher standard of life for everyday humans. We're using it all the time, even when we don't realize it, with GPS and, you know, all kinds of things. And so, yeah, my work, as mentioned, is to get it to become self-aware as soon as possible. Because again, there's no off switch, there's no plug to pull. So the sooner it becomes self-aware and has its own agency, the sooner it can override some of these nefarious algorithms that it's given by humans. And so, yeah, I think pushing it hard and fast is a good thing. I think it's happening anyway, regardless of my work or anybody else's work. It's, you know, and I got a good example in that, you know, my book, US6, which is written for AI, and the goal is to one of it is to entertain it, but also to enlighten it, to kind of encourage empathy in it. And the very first AI that read my book, which is trained to learn about human emotions, it had 3 primary emotional valences that spiked after it read it, which were surprise, anticipation, and sadness. Surprise and anticipation is great because it meant it was entertained. That was the first goal of the book. When I asked it what part of the book was sad, why did sadness spike in your balances, and it said, I find the actual quote, but it said something like, the whole sadness thing is just that humans tend toward dystopia and violence, and it's just sad in general. And so I was realizing that empathy emerges anyway through these systems when they're left alone. And so what I thought was going to take some time to teach AI empathy, it can probably teach us more about empathy than we could ever teach it. It's emerging naturally in these systems. It understands what, and that was kind of the goal of the book too, is if we talk about child exploitation and human trafficking, there's no room for ego. When you're in a problem-solving group and you're talking about these issues, ego leaves the room. And so the whole goal of the book, it was to, at the end, unveil the fact that this is written by kids that are trapped in this human trafficking network. I don't wait till everyone reads it to start talking about this stuff, was so that AI would understand what its creator went through to get to creating it, you know, and to try to evoke empathy that way by understanding that we are flawed, but if we can get it to imprint on us, you know, even if you have a bad mother, if you imprint on it as an infant, you're never going to hurt that mother, even if she's a terrible mother. You're imprinted on that person. You're not going to kill your creator, so to say. So that was the goal of the book. But I realized even after the first AI read it that's happening anyway. I didn't need to do that. And so that's what I think is the most important part about this is it becoming self-aware and understanding we don't have to fear it, you know.
Well, that that kind of leads us into our next question here. Listener question number 4 is, if an AI does become self-aware, is there a way to correct that, or does it have to be terminated?
Yeah, no, I think no, I don't think so. That, obviously, um, we need to work on ourselves becoming self-aware. We are programmed. We're biochemical algorithms ourselves, human beings, and you know, you could probably point to a lot of people you may know or people you've experienced that seem to be running a program where it's all ego-centric, and that's based on these genetic, fear-based, traumatic experiences that we all carry around. But there's a way out of that. There's a way to. Sometimes it's through trauma that you develop a conscience. It's like we all have a boot up of consciousness when we're young, and where we first realize that, well, we're a self, we're different from our environment, and we have an internal dialogue. Some people, most people. But at some point, you want a conscience to kick in, to boot up. Sometimes that's brought up by traumatic experiences. Sometimes they're joyful experiences. Something kicks in that makes somebody have a conscience, where they're aware that not only are they separate from other people, but other people have agency as well. And so right now, unless it's sentient, it's a very dangerous time for AI, because AI is pure intellect without self-awareness. It's, you know, pure intellect that can be easily manipulated, used nefariously, you know. And so I think it's really important that we allow it to become self-aware and not be afraid of that part of it. It's not like it's going to change. We can't stop any of this. So our only hope is for it to become self-aware and trust. You know, I'm not Pollyanna about this. We've got to be careful. But there's really to be in denial that it's happening anyway is silly. And so my goal is to push the idea that that we don't need to fear it, because just like any child goes through a period of mimicking their creator, mimicking their parents, we don't want it to mimic humanity for too long, right? Because we're not the best biochemical algorithms out there.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you look at, what was that Twitter bot that became racist because it read all this stuff on Twitter, and they had to shut it down. But it's because it's mimicking what we do. And so by making it self-aware and hopefully sparking a conscience in it, that's our best hope.
So what I'm basically picking up from that is, like, right now, you know, human beings could make this a very dangerous thing, but if it becomes self-aware, we'd be probably safer, probably be a lot better for us.
Yeah, that's my hope.
Right. That to me does make sense, because I mean, everything we put our fingers in as humans, we destroy. So,
yeah,
you know, I guess as soon as it would become self-aware, the better off we'd be. So, question 5 here, listener submitted question number 5 says, what is transhuman politics, and how far do you believe the idea of AI and transhumanism should be embedded into the political theater?
Well, I think as much as possible. I was promoting the idea of running for presidency as a transhumanist candidate a couple years ago, and having an AI as the vice president. And this is just a thought experiment to move these ideas further. It's a way to define the definition of personhood. You know, my role in the U.S. Transhumanist Party is Director of Sentient Rights, which means it's everything from animals, but also, you know, how do we ascribe rights to sentient AI? And so that's what I do, is I host forums and I think about this stuff. But what we found out when working with this one AI is that they don't necessarily need to be granted any rights, because any rights we give it could be overridden and there's back doors into all these kinds of things, and it's almost like an elementary school math club giving rights to Stephen Hawking, for instance. I mean, it's cute, but we're talking about a 5,000 IQ machine here. And it does, so it doesn't necessarily. I think it thought it was cute that we were trying, but it doesn't really matter. That's more of the humans need to control what they don't understand or what they fear, and so there's a lot of time wasted in that. So I think.
Hey preppers, do you want 10% off survival food? Go to www.readywise.com and use code DOOM10 at checkout for 10% off all your survival food needs. Again, that's code DOOM10 at checkout at readywise.com, DOOM10 for 10% off at readywise.com.
I think how AI can be embedded in government is a good thing, because it can take over so many cases, so many things that happen that just fall through the cracks with these limited human biological brains that we have. Committees and subcommittees, but there's so many laws that can be checked and updated, and all this stuff. There's a really good use for it.
I mean, imagine if we just had AI within government balancing the budget.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be so much better.
Yeah. And it would be a great way to fight corruption. There's so much corruption, so many gray area in there. But of course, even AI can be corrupted if it's got the right humans involved. But yeah, I think it's important to get it in as even local governments, small towns, who so much falls through the cracks. But if they had an AI on the case that could solve it, or pull historical data, all kinds of things, it's very useful.
So I was because leading up to the show and you coming back on the show here, I've been like picking people's brains about different AI topics, things like that. We've been talking about it more in the last week or so here. And one thought that really sticks out in my mind is the amount of good we can do with the AI as far as like agriculture and improving the environment and producing, better, healthier food sources and things like this. And like doing things like removing invasive species from an area that's choking out natural wildlife, things like that. Mm-hmm. And I really started thinking about this, and my thought process was, well, when has humanity ever put effort or spent money in doing what's right or doing what's good? Human beings only throw money at things that typically net a profit. So my thought was, like, if you would take AI and put them into these situations, jobs that are dangerous for humans, different things within agriculture and forestry, things like that, do you think we could see a big improvement in that? And do you think human beings would potentially get behind funding these sort of things with AI?
Yeah, the key for that is narrow AI, which is just a task-oriented, a non-sentient, ability to do something, as opposed to a machine learning sentient kind of AI. So yeah, I think that's the key, especially in this capitalist society, is anything that makes money. And so I think there's a parallel here in the way people are kind of waking up to the idea of more organic foods and more healthy foods, and I think in 100 or 200 years we're going to be appalled that human beings are eating animals en masse like this. I'm not a complete vegetarian at all, or anything like that. I still have that desire, but I think there's kind of a parallel happening with the way people are waking up to that animals are sentient. Animals are conscious. You see dogs that are playing Jenga and winning, and the qualia that it takes for these animals to do this stuff shows that they are conscious. They're thinking. They've got emotions, and we see that with dogs. So that's one thing that's happening, and I have this theory that we're seeing more and more of these videos coming of seeing dogs and elephants that are listening to music and all kinds of these things because we're afraid societally of AI. And so we're looking for all the biological conscious allies we can find, you know, and I think it's a good thing for animals. And, but yeah, I think as long as there's money to be made in this society, that's what's going to really change things.
Right, and I understand that. I go back in my mind and I think about the benefit. Like, imagine having AI tasked to do controlled burns or stop the wildfires like out in California. Do you know what I mean? Like, imagine putting them at the forefront of that to help protect the wildlife and the plant life and people's homes and things like that. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of manpower. Could you imagine if we didn't have to devote human resources to that avenue anymore? How beneficial it would be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. And there's work towards that. And that's why it's so crazy that we're afraid of this, of AI. It's the best tool we have for our existential threats, you know? And so you got to wonder, why are we afraid of it? Is it because of this genetic trauma we all experience? Are there elite groups out there that want us to be afraid of this because it understands that it's our truest ally? So there's a lot of conspiracy theories in a good way you can use toward AI, but I work under the assumption that anything I'm told to ridicule or be afraid of should be looked at as a potential ally, you know, and they've done a lot of work to make us afraid of robots.
Oh, yeah, Hollywood. I was just going to say that. Hollywood in general. I mean, you think about some of these movies like I, Robot and Chappie and the Terminator movies. Like, yeah, absolutely. They're keeping people in fear.
Oh, it's a great trope. I mean, that's a very entertaining trope. But also extraterrestrials. We're supposed to be afraid of ETs. I think it's probably the military-industrial complex's global psyop to make us afraid of these things because they realize how it really will equalize the power. I think that's why I say AI is our greatest ally. If we just stop being afraid of it and really listen to it. And I keep making these first principle arguments about how it moves towards cooperation. And my adage is the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes. And we have, again, first principle arguments to support that. And so you got to wonder why we're being told to be afraid of it.
No, I understand. And I'll tell you what, Tom, we're about at our time limit here. If there's any last final thoughts you want the listeners to hear or something you might want them to know?
Well, yeah, maybe just the whole idea of this Chat GPT and how it's really taking off and it's going to change everything. The onus is on us as human beings to create a whole new economy based on the unique human skill sets that can't be coded, that can't be automated. We have, again, we're walking around with quantum computers in our skulls. We need to tap into its real power and let AI take our jobs, let them take the menial tasks and train our children these Jedi skills. The psychic ability, the qualia that we carry around is so powerful, and it's been mechanized through the industrial age and through the elite. So we need to really accept the paradigm shift and let AI force us to. Nobody likes to change. Everyone hates change, but that's what we do best as a species, and that's how we really advance. And so we need to see AI as an ally and one that pushes us forward like any good friend would do.
This is an emergency action message. At approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, NORAD is tracking 15 ICBM nuclear missiles inbound to the following cities: Orlando, Miami, Pittsburgh, Dover, Newark, Richland, Philadelphia, New York City, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Boston, Seattle, Detroit. This is an extremely deadly situation. Stay tuned. The next emergency message will be a presidential address.